I'm remiss.
There was,
Were there any public comments, Vice Chancellor Bailey?
one comment on the Q&A, and I didn't know if we were going to acknowledge
Oh,
that.
I don't know. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Well, first of all, let's find out if there's anyone that wants to speak. Vice Chancellor Bailey?
Mr. President, no one is seeking recognition to speak at this time. And
what
the comment in the chat was, why do we need to rush back into meeting in person? What is the research-based benefit / impetus?
All right, thank you for sharing that. Okay. I guess we're ready to move on then at this point. The next one is 210603C, review of policy recommendations for COVID-19 recovery plan. Again, I'll come back to Chancellor Clare to lead us in this discussion.
Thank you so much, President Nuris. And I'm going to try to just highlight some things go quickly because I know I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about this topic. There's no question. So I want to make some general points first, and then I thought what we might do is walk through the policy framework and have kind of organized it in related areas. So I thought we'd talk about one area, have a full discussion, and get to the next area. But comprehensive, we need a comprehensive framework to move forward. So I'm going to kind of use a little bit of a cheat sheet here, but tonight we are presenting a draft recovery framework, and I want to emphasize to everybody the word draft. This is the board's opportunity and the public's opportunity to really get a first read and for us to take comments. And then what we'd like to do is come back to you, hopefully at the very next meeting, incorporate those comments and so that you could actually enact policy. The framework was created in response to the board's direction, as you've already alluded to accelerate in-person classes and support services and to really more fully open our campuses and work sites this fall. As I said, our plan is to bring this back at the very next meeting if we can. A couple of other parameters that I want to talk about. This is truly a policy document. And believe me, those of us there's a lot of us that have been involved with this work for the last year. And I'm looking at some of the faces on the screen, and we'll talk about policy, and it's almost impossible not to get into the weeds of the planning. Well, how are we going to do this? What about that? And I recognize that's a natural response, and I understand that. I'm hoping we can keep it at the policy level. I can tell you that our operations group and other groups are charged with the detailed planning to effectuate these decisions. And just as we developed extraordinarily detailed plans, major spreadsheets detailing every little item when we had to vacate our campuses and we moved to a distance mode, we'll do the same thing in terms of coming back to campus. And the process is just as complex, if not possibly more complex. And in fact, for some obvious things, we've already started the general planning process. For instance, there's no question that we're going to, unless you tell us otherwise, we are going to assess our physical spaces to make sure that we're in compliance with Cal OSHA. We've already started some detailed planning around that as an example. The other thing I want to say before we kind of get into this is that, and Aaron shared these statistics, at any given time for a year, we enroll about 30,000 students right now, unduplicated head count over the year. We have about 1,500 employees. And with that, we sort of mirror society, right? We're almost like a small city, if you will. And all of the arguments, the debates, the concerns, the fears, everything that you're hearing, just in general, in public, they're the same. Their same discussions are here. It's impossible to have this many people, to serve this many people, and not have some real differences of opinion in terms of the best path forward. I just want us to all acknowledge that. At the same time, we've done our very best to capture the voices of our employees, of our students in particular, by administering surveys. We've had very high response rates, and with that high of a sample return size, you can make general conclusions about the overall population. And I'll share some of the key data points with you in just a little bit. And finally, before we kind of dive into two other points, first of all, we do recognize that we have a participatory governance and really a kind of a a means, a way of getting feedback from our participatory governance groups. I have to tell you, those of us that have been doing this for a long time, usually the last 2 weeks of the semester, which is when we started this process, it's sort of hands off because people are so busy. They're just trying to finish out the academic year. It's usually our very busiest time of the year. But we can talk to the presidents a little bit later, but I know that they did their very best to engage their on-campus participatory governance groups and got some really good feedback. Also, because many, if not all of these policy decisions may be subject to bargaining of impact of policy, Cheng Yu and I actually reached out to all three of our collective bargaining groups in an informal basis. We all agreed this is not bargaining, just to kind of hear their feedback and their concerns. And I'm appreciative of the time that was given to all of us, and the policy literally changed after every single one of those conversations. So thank you to those who sort of helped us frame this. And then finally, before I get into the details, I do want to emphasize, you just heard a strategic plan overview given by Aaron McVean, and you asked about data and how we measure things. That's how we have to make decisions here. And so our response really is data driven. It's based upon what feedback we are getting from our stakeholders. And I wrote here, it's data driven, but bound by rules. And Cal OSHA is probably the most, the most pertinent rule here, but these rules are changing and they're often in conflict with each other. Just during this meeting, we got another update from another, about a rule. And I've got text, did you see this latest one? So we are doing our very best to respond to a constantly changing environment. I just wanted to emphasize that. So that's kind of an overview. This policy framework does come out of our Emergency Operations Center. We still have that Operations Center stood up. We had planned, and we may still, to take that center down by June 15th, although with all this detailed planning that needs to occur, we may keep it in place. I want to remind you that we expanded the membership so that we do have faculty and classified staff voices in there, and again we're using student surveys to capture the student voice. Most of the people that are involved with this have been involved from March 17th, 2020 on. So the people that are helping frame this policy are the people that have really done this work and understand it down to the last detail. So with that, I'd like to just kind of walk us through the overall policy. And what I wanted to do is kind of take it in related items. So the first one I would say is opening up our campuses, right? And what are the relevant policies for that? And I want to just talk through that just at a high level. I'll pause and then we can get feedback from the public and feedback from the board, and then we'll move to the next item, which would be the proposed policy on vaccinations and so on. So this one they're all difficult to do, but as you can see, our preliminary recommendation is a return to work sites for our classified personnel, our managers and administrators during the week of August 2nd. But the reality is, to enact this, we're going to have to phase this, and as soon as we're able to meet the OSHA regulations and we're comfortable with that, and the rules allow us to do so, we're going to start working with employee groups and hopefully encourage people to come back even a little sooner if they're able to and comfortable to. We may not have everybody back by the week of August 2nd either. I think it's going to take some time to get people back. And this was based upon feedback that we got from many of the folks that have to, deal with technology, so you can't just have your entire staff and administrators come back the week of August 2nd and everybody needs to be plugged back into their technology. There's facilities issues and so on. So we actually see the way this being implemented is probably a phased approach over time. The other piece of this that we're recommending is obviously if faculty are scheduled to teach in person, and we'll update you on our efforts there. Of course, they're going to be in person on campus, but faculty that are still 100% online, they would conduct their class from wherever location they would want, but we would invite and encourage all faculty to come back at their discretion during the fall semester. Part and parcel with that, and then I'll stop for just a second before we get to the other piece of this, is that with 1,500 employees, you're going to have, there are going to be concerns, personal concerns. There may be a medical concern. There may be a family situation. We're getting feedback from people that, said, well, I got to get I'm on 3 wait lists just to get daycare. I'm really worried about getting daycare for my child. And so I believe we're going to just have to be flexible, but we're going to have to be consistent with the rules so that everybody's treated the same. But we're going to have to work with people because this is a pretty quick adjustment. And I want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is considerate of our employees and their needs, but also fair across the board. So I'm going to pause on those two, if you'd like, and perhaps open it up to, or I'll let you decide what you'd like to do next. But I want, those two are directly related. Well, let me finish the other two that are related as well, and then we can pause. Item 7 is, I think, pretty obvious, and that's an easy one. We will open up our campuses. The checkpoints are coming down, so on June 15th, you don't have to check in. That we had to do that for contact tracing purposes, but in accordance with the governor's order, we will open completely. A lot of our services already been restored on May 18th. So we want to make sure that we do get people back on our campuses and enjoying our campuses in a much more natural way. And then it goes without saying this, I'm going to skip over to number 9, that in order to get people back, we will ensure that our work sites are assessed and prepared to work, return to work per Cal OSHA guidelines. And I know that one of the big concerns that was mentioned at the last meeting was building ventilation. Believe me, that's top on our list. And we could do a deeper dive into that with Vice Chancellor Nunez or Director Radowski, but we're completely on top of that. And we will do a full assessment to make sure that our spaces are safe before we allow occupancy. So I'm going to stop with those 4. It's item number 1, item number 2, item number 7, and item number 9. They're all kind of related, and happy to pause here for discussion on those items and feedback.
All right, let's see if there's any public comment, Vice Chancellor Bailey, on those specific items.
Mr. President, I see no one seeking recognition at this time on those items. I'm sorry, we now have a comment. Jay Carson.
All right.
Hi there. I guess it was really in the Q&A as a clarifying question. Will we be able to do public comment on each one, or is there only one opportunity for public comment?
No, we're going to break it up in sections. So if you'd like to have a comment on the ones which the Chancellor just identified, you can speak to those. And when we take up the other ones, you can speak to the others.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll keep them all
Yes.
short. The first thing I want to say is that I hope that after 15 months and major facilities planning, that you already have a map of ventilation of every building on your campuses. At the K-12 area level, we were able to do this within 6 months. And I understand that you have more buildings and more acres, but you also, you should not be worried about ventilation right now. I hope that map already exists and that every room has already been assessed and should be publicly available. Number 2, the idea that we would be moving slowly right now is just taking all the patience for me in the world, that people can go back to work. And I get that everyone has different HR, is going to have HR stuff to do. But again, everybody else is open. People are on campus working. So go ahead and negotiate with the individual HR situations that have to happen, but there's no reason to even have excuses that they wouldn't be back working on campus by August 2nd. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, your next speaker is Lori Slickton.
All right. Yes.
Yahoo.
Yes, Larry.
Oh,
you're
we
on.
have great. We have liftoff. Nice. Okay. Yeah. So I was, invited to speak. I'm Lori Slickton. I teach anthropology at Skyline College. I am the AFT representative to our Health and Safety and Emergency Preparedness Committee. So I'm not sure if this is following exactly what the Chancellor Claire was asking us to do, but my concerns are these. And I've been to campus to pick up materials and things and have gone through the checkpoints, but per their own self-reporting, a number of students and faculty have no intention of getting a vaccine. Many in that demographic, and I don't know these people in particular, but are also not people who want to be compliant with face coverings. We've seen a lot of this. The pandemic is nowhere near over. Today, Britain, who's much more ahead of us in terms of vaccination rates, just had its highest number of infections since February. China has sections of the country that are shut down, all of these having to do with new variants. There's no reason for us to expect that we're going to be separate from that and to expect more to come. Current Kalosha guidelines, as I'm sure you all know, require that face masks be worn and social distancing continue indoors unless everyone is fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Our administration so far has indicated that they don't intend to enforce bad actors. So who does it leave it to? And that includes employees, students, outside contractors or other vendors, members of the community, as these are open campuses. We all miss our life. There's no question about that. The question is when is the right time with a virus that is mutating, and we want these vaccines to continue to work. And as an anthropologist and coming out of the medical anthropology field, I'm seriously, profoundly concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the health of myself, my family. I have vulnerable elderly family members that I'm responsible for. I was supposed to speak at the last board meeting, but my father's doctor called me to tell me that he's failing in his health, and that tough old Marine, US Marine veteran, is afraid of all this reopening because I may not be able to come and care for him as freely. And we have to remember that, okay? That we aren't just teachers doing teaching and students. We're a whole diverse group of people. And this has impacted my family directly and continues to do so. And that's just one of my members. Maybe you're going to get to this at some point, but I think we talked about, it was mentioned adding more sections of courses face-to-face. I'm a single person department, a rather small department. Most of us single person department, we can't just absorb new sections of classes. We've already made our schedule for online for the fall with the best of intentions. There has to be careful thought in adding new sections of courses. I go through this with every dean I've ever had. Can we add this? Do we have room for that? Let's make sure we have enough offerings to get us through the AA transfer degree in anthropology. And the other piece was, I understand from the union that, and maybe Chancellor Claire can clarify, that it was indicated to the union that we would be very lenient toward low or lightly enrolled courses, even if they were in the single digits. And I don't know if that was just referencing online courses, but I would certainly hope in the spirit of equity that it would be extended to online courses as well. Face-to-face, online, keeping them the same. But just adding sections of classes because people have decided that the governor wants to open the state ahead of Kalosha that's not how we've worked curriculum in the past. And I don't think it's going to be healthy for my program, and it will create a thinning of enrollment where enrollment might be spread all over the place, and then no class looks viable. So I really urge careful consideration, please, for our smaller programs, and put the demand or the excitement and enthusiasm in some context of a global, rapidly changing pandemic that is not improving. We are maybe happy with a few numbers here now locally. That is not what's going on in the world. And I hope for all of us, it isn't going to unfold for us the way it is in Britain right now, for example, or China. Anyway, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. President, your next speaker is Vera Chiano.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Thank you. I just wanted to note of Mike Claire mentioned, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, the using student surveys to capture student voice. When I finished my teaching human anatomy and physiology online degree just recently, a master's program, they taught us that we are teaching like 4 to 5 generations within one classroom. And the student survey is really not the language that students speaks. You know, it's not really the best way to capture the voice of the students. And teaching yoga and having, right now I have 150 or so students starting on Monday. Students like to communicate in different ways. That really isn't my mode. I'm 50, I'll be 53 soon. And it's just, I don't think we're really hearing from the students as the best we could possibly be hearing from them. So maybe there should be other ways that we reach out to them, because I've heard other things in addition to, you know, they have a diverse a range of opinions as well as going back to campus. So that's my one point. And the second point is on my syllabus, and this is my responsibility to teaching thousands of students that keeps us as a district out of being away from being sued. I have to include a disclaimer, and I state, and I'll read it, this is on my syllabus every semester: the professor is not attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any emotional, mental, or physical condition or disease. Always seek medical advice from a licensed medical professional. And I also state that the information provided in my course is for educational purposes and is not intended to substitute professional or religious counsel. So I feel like we really need to be careful. None of us are, I mean, I don't know if any of you are doctors, but I know that for sure none of you are my doctor, and you don't know my medical history. You don't know what I've been through with asthma and the damage to my lungs. And, you know, you just, there's not stuff that you know about me. And I tell my students that I'm not here to tell them what they should or should do as far as vaccination or masks are concerned, because I am not in the position to state something like that. So I just feel like we need to put that out there, that we need to be careful of that. And it's something that happened, you know, 20 years ago. We were asked to, you know, to make sure people had their tuberculosis shot. And it was just, it put faculty and staff in a really bad position. So please consider A, how we're communicating with students, and B, what position you might be putting, the compromising position you might be putting faculty and staff in by just throwing out a rule and not really thinking of the logistics. You know, for instance, my walking into a class, you know, of several classes, or being on a Zoom or on just on Canvas with 100 some students, and how I'm supposed to approach that.
Thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. President, your next speaker is Marianne Koletsky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Marianne Koletsky, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the AFT Union that represents all SMCCCD faculty. And I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of AFT. And in particular, I'm here to express our concern at hearing that college health and safety committees will not meet during the summer, despite faculty requests for them to do so, and our concern that minutes from meetings that these committees have held, with the exception of CSM, remain inaccessible. In fact, the health and safety committees at Kenyatta and Skyline have not posted any minutes to their health and safety committee website since 2019. So college health and safety committees are a crucial place for faculty and staff to ask questions, voice concerns, and give feedback on reopening plans. Although many aspects of reopening plans are in flux, one thing that seems nearly certain is that decisions regarding reopening will be made over the summer, as we've talked about, to respond to changing circumstances and regulations. As we find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic, clearly these decisions will directly impact the health and safety of district employees. The fact that health and safety committees do not plan to meet during the summer means that faculty and staff will be prevented from giving input on decisions that clearly impact their health and the safety of their work sites. According to our contract, AFT is also entitled to 2 representatives on each campus committee, including health and safety. Meanwhile, we have no representative on the Emergency Operations Center team, and that's the body that has made many critical determinations regarding reopening. I hear what Chancellor Clare is saying about expanded representation. I can just say that as AFT, we're not part of that. So our lack of representation on the Emergency Operations Center, together with the fact that health and safety committees will not meet until September, means that AFT is being left out of a decision-making process in which we should have a role. In addition to allowing faculty and staff to give input, health and safety committees are a crucial resource for employees to get the correct, up-to-date information about reopening plans. Committee members in turn share this information with other members of their divisions. Meeting minutes must be made accessible to employees who request them. Yet when faculty have written committee chairs requesting minutes, they have not received timely responses. So in conclusion, the decisions that the district is making right now obviously have a direct impact on our employees' ability to carry out their work safely and effectively, and on the health and safety of our students. As AFT, we are asking that the district include the voices of faculty and staff by ensuring that health and safety committees meet regularly, plan to meet this summer, and strive for transparency by making the minutes that reflect our district's plans and decision-making accessible. Public institutions like ours have an obligation to inform and involve their employees in this important work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, your next speaker is Rosemary Bell.
Can you folks hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you.
welcome.
Good evening. I just want to reiterate a few things that has come to mind. First of all, I think Chancellor Clare probably answered his own question in a way, because I'm looking at the California Department of Public Health site, which says here it was updated today. Guidance for individuals, those who are vaccinated, those who are not. And the requirement is basically for those who are unvaccinated, and I don't know how we're going to tell that, you must be wearing a mask. It is required. So if this is changing every hour, as you said, Chancellor, I do believe we should err on the side of caution. That's number one. Number two, one of my concerns, of course, and I said this at the last board meeting, is ventilation. And when Ms. Carson got on and said she'd be surprised if we did not have our ventilation, verified, I wasn't surprised. I just couldn't agree with her, because there have been numerous times when things supposedly were done on our campus at Skyline, and in fact, they were not well documented. I asked for verification the last time, and I'm still asking for it. I want to see the information about how the ventilation has been taken care of on Skyline, in all the colleges, but certainly Skyline. I think the date, June 15th, is the date, it's a political date for Governor Newsom. That's my opinion. That's all I'm saying on that. Whether or not we are going to be following his decision, or whether we follow the science and OSHA, I think that's more important than what the governor is saying. That's number 3 or 4. And one of the concerns I really have is that for those of us who may not come back in the fall, we already have online classes. My classes are filled. Okay. I'm concerned about retribution for those of us who, and I'm talking for all my colleagues here, staff, faculty, even administration. It's a concern. It's a concern for me and for some of my colleagues. Why do I feel that way? Because I've seen it in the past. And I'm concerned very much about that. So I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, you have no one else seeking recognition, but you have two comments in the chat that I'll read quickly. They're both from Jeremiah Sims. He states, I apologize. I have to use the Q&A for public comment because I cannot unmute. He has his children, I believe, asleep next to him. His comment is, I have heard more than once the trauma of BIPOC students used as the rationale for accelerating our return timeline. And admittingly, this is an incredibly important / exigent consideration. In my gut, however, this rationale feels overdetermined. If we are not sure that this is in fact true, empirically, not intuitively or anecdotally, that is, that as a hasty return will benefit poor BIPOC students, then we cannot make their suffering emblematic of this if there is ulterior motives, e.g. More affluent parents want their children to experience dual enrollment. We have to tell the truth about our motives. He continues in the second comment. We also rush to put everything online. Our faculty did an amazing job. Why would we rush into this again? I feel like we need to stay the course on January 3rd because it gives us time to ramp up. We have to treat students equitably. We also have to treat our faculty, staff, and administration equitably too.
Thank you.
And with that, I believe, I see Rosemary Bell's hand raised again, but I think it's probably from last time.
Yeah, I think that was from before.
You have no other comments this time, Mr. President?
No, thank you. Board members, it's back to you at this time. And I'm thinking we're just gonna, maybe we just need to hear the rest of the presentation.
Would you like to do
I don't
that?
want to have to go through 40 comments again on the next section. So let's just.
Do you want to just, I'll just go through it. Okay. Well, and appreciate those comments. It's helpful. It's helpful to hear. The next thing I want to cover is another difficult policy decision that we put before you, and that is this decision around whether or not to require the vaccination, both for employees as well as students. As we certainly, I think both the CSUs and the UCs have come out with that statement, and that sort of drove us to look at, should we do the same thing? Recognizing, of course, that there are going to be exceptions and exemptions. We know there's a religious exemption. We know that there's a medical exemption. Prior to this, and this is all in draft form, there's also a concern about we have either students or employees that may not qualify for those exemptions. And by the way, you have to have an FDA approved vaccination as well. We know that, but there are some people that are just not going to get the vaccination. They're going to refuse the vaccination. And we didn't leave room for that particular situation. And I want to make sure that as we rethink this or add to it, if the board wants to go in that direction, we're going to need to leave room for that, because that's just a reality. There's a certain percentage of folks that will not get the vaccination for their own personal reasons, and we're going to have to acknowledge that and figure out a way to work proactively. I do want to. I don't have a PowerPoint. I did not do a PowerPoint on purpose because you get enough PowerPoints from us. But I did want to let me share my screen if I can. I did want to just quickly put up some key data points. I don't know if you can, it's always hard when you're on the other end of this to see if you can see it. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to, and I didn't give you a bunch of data. We have survey results, and I know that you've seen some of the detailed surveys before. And I'm thinking out loud here. I think what might be helpful is we'll update our website to include all the survey results, all the information about COVID. We do have it in one place, and we'll continue. Now, I took a few statistics courses in college, a few research courses as well. And while I appreciate comments about surveys, the reality is, and I'll leave it to the researchers that actually put this together, when you have a large response, and in the case of our student surveys, we did have an N of 3338. Our researchers verified that that mapped to our student demographics appropriately. That's always a concern. Our researchers developed these surveys, and they're very careful about survey bias. There's a lot of other data points, but just to kind of do a check-in with the board, and this is just information, I don't have an opinion one way or another, but this was done in April. And at that time, 68% of the students who responded are either vaccinated or plan to be vaccinated by fall 2021. Now, we know students can report differently. I get that, but that was the best information we had. 20% of the students were unsure if they would be vaccinated by fall 2021. 7% will not be vaccinated. 5% preferred not to answer. Then we went back and asked, well, would you favor a vaccination mandate for students? And 75% of the students, so this data was shared with you before, either favored or strongly favored a vaccine requirement. 11% of students either oppose or strongly oppose a vaccine requirement, and 14% of students were undecided. We had the demographics that we shared with you, and certainly our communities of color were more skeptical of the vaccine, and we understand why. We've shared that information before with you, and we'll put the other details up as well. We also asked our employees, although we didn't get to it directly, and we probably should, but we did not survey the employee opinion about a vaccine mandate. However, there was a high degree of concern at the time, this was back in April, things have changed, about a return to the work site across all employee groups. And the number one factor that employees said would ease concerns is knowing that students and fellow employees were vaccinated. So I share this, and I'll stop now. I share this with you not to render an opinion on whether we should have a vaccine or not, but just to share some very high level baseline data with you. As we've checked with our colleagues around the state, different community colleges are taking different approaches. And I've heard that there are, I don't know if this is true or not, through the grapevine, I've heard that there are community colleges in the Bay Area that are kind of waiting to see how this is going to go with us. So we may be one of the early ones out in the Bay Area. The big one, some of the bigger districts, I believe Los Rios is not mandating a vaccine requirement, at least last I heard. I don't know if that's changed. The big news for us last week was San Diego Community College was mandating a vaccine requirement, and it was based upon the results that they got both from students as well as employees. So our preliminary recommendation, and of course, subject to lots of discussion, lots of debate, we understand that. I think we're going to have lots of interesting comments on this, is that we would recommend a vaccine or mandate a vaccine for all employees. Again, with those exemptions of a medical issue or disability, a seriously held religious belief, and currently, until we get FDA approval, if we can't actually mandate a vaccine on anyone. I will add to this, again, based upon some conversations I had, that if we were to follow this, we were going to continue with this policy, we'd probably have to put some language in there for decision, of course. But we're going to have a handful of employees that are going to refuse the vaccine no matter what, and we're going to have to figure out a way to respond to that. I've got some ideas. I won't share them at the board meeting, but I do have some ideas. And then again, same thing with our students. And by the way, you're going to say, well, how do you know? How can you tell? This is part of our planning process, and we have technology infrastructure in place to help us in terms of keeping track of some of this stuff. But we're saying the same thing about our students, that we would expect students, we would recommend to the board that students returning to campus would either expect to have the vaccine, and if they didn't have the vaccine, then again, and I didn't mention this before, but Cal OSHA does have current protocols for unvaccinated people for whatever reason, and it's usually surveillance testing on a pretty frequent basis. So what we're trying to do is accommodate anybody that wants to be on our campus, either by having the vaccine or testing, so that everybody on our campuses has reasonable assurance that, you know, we've done everything we can to keep our sites safe. So that's the discussion around the vaccines. I know it's a big one, and you know, not an easy decision to make. And we've spent a lot of time, believe me, going back and forth on what our recommendation would be. And then the final big piece of this, related to that, I'm sorry, vaccine resources. And I know that I might have Ray. In fact, Ray, can I have you talk a little bit about our work in terms of providing vaccine, or our strategy for providing vaccine resources? Because I think you have better info than I do currently. So I'm going to turn over to Ray to talk about that for just a minute.
Thank you, Chancellor Claire. Good evening, Board of Trustees. So we've been working on this piece and trying to figure out certainly how to support vaccinations. And of course, if we look at any number of federal, state, local guidelines, vaccines are really at the top of the strategy spectrum. And so we've been working with a vaccination task force, looking at the possibility of being able to provide vaccinations. And after further investigation right now, with vaccinations being readily available in the community, federal support for those to be offered in the community, we've actually been reaching out to organizations such as Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and with that, we're able to partner with them to be able to create a program that really refers the students, so that we do a high touch and then be able to either have vaccination clinics on campus or have set aside appointments readily available at local pharmacies. And so that's where we're at right now, and we're continuing that work in preparation with this framework and what the ultimate decisions are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. You want to finish up the remaining points that?
Sure, and then we can have a conversation about the entire document. I'm sorry, yes. I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but these items just sort of all go together. They're all interrelated. They'll have to happen for a campus return. And then lastly, and it's a direct response to the board's direction, is our response in terms of increasing on-campus access, both for courses as well as for student support services. And I'm going to share this one more time in terms of the raw data that we've gotten, and then I'll talk to you about our approach. So let me share this one more time. I'm not so good at sharing as others. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing we did immediately after getting immediately after the May 12th board meeting, I'm sorry, actually the presidents and I met to say, okay, how are we going to respond? What's our best path forward? And we felt like we needed to kind of check in with our students. And we issued a very simple survey. Our researchers got very busy on that. And so this is very fresh data. It was given, I believe, the week of May 17th. And I don't know when the close date was, but I think it was open for about 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Aaron can correct me. And again, a very high response rate from our students across the district. We had 4,000 students, almost 4,100 students respond. That gives you a big N. We also verified that those responses mapped to our student demographics. So we have, in my opinion, and the researchers could say more about this, an accurate and reflective survey. And you can see what the numbers were. I want to emphasize that this is a point in time. So I fully realize that students are responding to this that have already planned their fall. And so it's a pretty, you're going to get a pretty high response rate based upon what students have already selected. I was intrigued by Aaron's earlier numbers about, coming out of this, what do students expect? And it is lower. There's no question that going forward, students are going to prefer a mix. But for fall only, you can see that 62.1% of the respondents preferred distance learning for fall. 28.4% preferred on-campus learning. 9.5% of the respondents were not sure. And then for those students who, with a preference to attend in person for fall, they were most interested in seeing STEM classes offered in person. Students were also interested in courses, labs requiring a didactic experience, a hands-on experience, if you will, as well as physical education courses. And the good news there, and Jeremy Wallace, speaking for the Academic Senate, or perhaps Aaron can tell you, that was actually a strategy of ours going into this. There was a real emphasis on classes that were hard to convert. So we already have a lot of STEM classes, and I believe we're actually bringing back a lot of our physical education classes next fall as well. So with that said, our strategy, we wanted to be realistic. The easiest thing would be, well, first of all, let me tell you that because we've already begun enrolling students in online sections, we have to commit to those sections. You can't just change the modality for students because there's a large number in most of these courses that expect an online mode. The analogy or the example I would give you, and I was a longtime dean, a longtime vice president of instruction. For a course, you can change the instructor if you have to. You can change locations of courses. You can change a room number. Sometimes, unfortunately, you have to cancel a class because of low enrollment. What you can't do is change the start time. Nor can you, in this case, you can't change the modality. So we did not want to pull the rug out from under students that are already enrolled in classes. Yes, Trustee Goodman?
I wasn't going to say anything on this area, but just to that point,
yeah.
When we first talked about going to online, the rationale was it would be easier to go from online to in person. Therefore, that's why we jumped to do online versus saying, hey, let's say we're going to go online, and it would be harder to go in person, and then it'd be harder to go online.
Sure.
But now you're saying that we can't do it. So what is true? And so it's just like we're hearing.
Got it.
Make sense of what I'm hearing. That's why I had to just jump in right there.
I got you. Yeah, very good point. And I understand. I think what we're talking about is in an emergency circumstance, right? So if we were back when we were having the discussion, if we had contemplated a full return to fall, right, and we had another outbreak of the pandemic, we would have to very quickly go back to shelter in place. And I could have Jeremy Wallace perhaps speak to this, but it was really under an emergency condition. What I'm talking about here, and I get your point, and I see your colleagues kind of nodding their head, is that this is not necessarily an emergency situation. This is talking about a student that may have transportation concerns, may actually be residing in another county that's relying on this online course and able to access us, and they're telling us at a rate of like 62%. That's our preferred mode, at least for fall. So I understand the question. I hope that makes sense. It was really, if we were stuck in an emergency, it's the faculty's opinion that it's easier to go online to on campus than back. So Jeremy, I don't know if.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, like, what type of emergency would have us go from online to in person?
Well, that's a good point. I guess you're right. I see what you're saying. Jeremy, I'm going to turn that one over to the professor.
The end of the internet.
What's that?
No, I think what we're doing is actually that easy piece, which is that we're adding sections of online classes.
On campus classes.
On campus classes, right? And I can actually even tell you that one of my classes is completely full already, one of my on-campus classes, and the other one's getting lots of students. So there's interest, but I think just to kind of reiterate what Mike is saying is, that we have students who have signed up for classes, assuming that they're going to be able to take those classes online. We have no idea who those students are. I think it'd be irresponsible to, transitioning classes from an online space to an in-person space, knowing that those students are out there. But, we have added lots of in-person classes to our schedule on a voluntary basis, right? A lot of faculty are interested in teaching on campus. We've added those sections. And I think that's kind of what that easy process is, right? Let's open up the section.
Can I ask a question, Mike? Or Tom? So I think it's great that we're getting people to sign up online. That's awesome. It deals with our existential threat of losing enrollment and becoming completely unuseful. So it's great that we're offering classes online. But of course, people are taking classes online if they don't have the option to take them in person. So a very useful fact that would be helpful as I think about this is how many classes are we offering or class sections? How many class sections are online?
Right.
And how many class sections are in person as of today?
Right.
And if I'm not suggesting, I don't think anybody's suggesting we need to go 100% online or 100% on in person.
Right.
But I have to think that a lot of the folks who've signed up for online classes are signing up for online classes because that's their only choice.
Sure. So let me get to that. That's a great question. And so, but I wanted to lay out the basic strategy is let's not pull the rug out from under the students that are already enrolled in online because they may be enrolled for a lot of different reasons. And we don't want to do that. At the same time, the way we can increase the offerings on campus is literally to add sections. And I want to respond to, I forget who mentioned it, but a faculty member, I really appreciate this. I believe this is a semester where we're hoping to grab a lot of enrollment. We actually want to do a major marketing push and be very clear about what our intentions are. And I'll get back to that. So I'm hoping we get more enrollment, but I'm also recognizing we may be spreading enrollment over more sections. And we're just going to have to do that this fall as we make this transition. We're going to have to be comfortable with that. Let me give you the numbers, Trustee Pimentel and the rest of the board. As of today, we have 323 sections with on-campus options. That is 16.5% of the courses offered district-wide. Our goal, and this is our strategy, and we're trying to be honest with our students. We do not want to run classes that we have no way of running if we can't get staff, right? If we can't get staffing. Our goal is to match overall the on-campus offerings with what our student survey results are telling us. So our goal is to try to get as close to that 30% as we can. Our students are, and we realize we have some incoming students that might feel differently. I understand that. Our goal is also to make sure that we're covering those classes that have, the STEM classes and other areas. And that would get us up to 600, give or take. The math gets a little tricky because if you add one, you're adding one to the numerator and the denominator, right? But we're really targeting or trying to get up to about 600 sections total. And since the board director, we've already added 85. But we want to do this, as some of the faculty members mentioned, in a very thoughtful way. An easy thing would be just to dump a bunch of classes and call them staff and worry about trying to staff them later if they fill. We don't want to do that. The worst thing you can do, if you put a class out there, you're saying we intend to run that class unless it's low enrolled. So our work now is to continue to work with our faculty, find new faculty as well that are interested in teaching online. We've kind of taken a first step at that, and we'll come back around. I am mindful of the other comment about somebody being pressured to do this. We don't want to do that. We want people on our campuses that actually are comfortable about being on campus and teaching for us. So my goal is to, and the president's, I'm driving the president's nuts, but I said we have to have this completely locked in by July 1st. Time is of the essence. We made a good first attempt. There's more coming. We're not including dual enrollment because those meet on site anyway, so that doesn't count for us, right? So we didn't want to take credit for something that's already on site. And then the other thing that we're considering are late start classes, right? Because some people are still going to need a little bit more time, and late start classes can be very helpful and beneficial to students, particularly if they're in the through the first quarter of a semester, they feel like they have to drop a class for whatever. They can pick up a class late start, and we want to put late start on campus. And then I'll stop and just go back to the fact that we intend to run a very aggressive marketing campaign. And what I want is a separate schedule for each college of all our on-campus courses, that once we have this locked in. And I want each one of our students to get that schedule via email, right? So so if they're interested in on-campus courses, they will get a listing of those on-campus courses, so they're easy to find. And again, through our marketing, we don't have the strategy yet, but we are going to do a very aggressive marketing campaign. And you know, I keep having to battle the hashtags, but it is something for everyone. If you want to be online, great. A lot of you are telling us you want to be online, but if you really want to connect and get back to campus, we're doing our very best to have courses there for you that you've told us you wanted. So with that, I think I've covered the major topics. The work now we have to do is to continue to circle around, continue to work with our faculty, and work, frankly, with our collective bargaining unit as well. Our collective bargaining units. We may have some negotiation or MOU issues there as we work this through, but that's the best strategy we could develop at this point.
Okay, there's the presentation. Board members. Yes, Trustee Goodman.
Yes, I have 3 questions. First of which is about Ms. Carson's comment about ventilation mapping. Can you say whether or not we've began that and where we are in that process? If we're 50% complete, 10%, if we haven't done anything?
Great question. Vice Chancellor Nunez, I'm pretty sure you're going to throw that over to Michelle, but I want to let you have the opportunity to respond.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The exact comment that you made about HVAC mapping, we have not done, but I will add that we've been under a capital improvement program for the last, almost 15 years. Over 80% of our buildings have been fully modernized or under new construction. So those HVAC systems are top-notch, state-of-the-art engineered systems. We do have a handful of legacy buildings. I can, just spit them off the top of my head: Skyline Building 1, Skyline Building 19, CSM Building 8, CSM Building 19, CSM Building 9, and Kenyatta 13. These are legacy buildings that are 60 years old, that, they're fully engineered and functioning at the time that they were designed and constructed. And so they're fully functioning at the intended pressures in terms of the outside air coming in, and the redistribution and recirculating of air and things of that nature. So I feel very confident that, again, the 80% of the buildings that have been fully modernized, they're in CIP 1, 2, and 3, are fully functional and will adhere to the appropriate HVAC standards. But again, we do have those handful of legacy buildings that are operating as designed back in the 1960s and 70s, which for many of them are 100% outside air being recirculated inside. I will also add, before I turn it over to Michelle for a more in-depth discussion.
Councilor Nunez, you answered my question. Thank you. But to the point that was being made, is when you hear that, yes, we're still talking about ventilation, but when you make your comment, you're saying, hey, all the work was done before, we haven't done anything. And that's what I'm asking. Has there been anything done since COVID about with our ventilation and what has been done? That's what I think our community wants to hear. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, at all 3 campuses are, as I mentioned earlier, CIP 1, 2, and 3, the buildings have been
I'm talking
modernized.
We have added from COVID I'm talking about from COVID until today. I get that a lot of work had been done, but obviously we still had issues with ventilation, because from COVID on, we've been talking about ventilation needs to be improved. So I want to know, and I believe the community wants to know, what has been done during this entire time that we've been on COVID. I know you've been working very hard. Could you speak specifically to the work that has been done since March of 2020 to now?
Absolutely. Michelle, do you want to go ahead and take that on?
Sure. So thank you very much. I appreciate the question. And as you know, ventilation is part of the CDC's layered approach to mitigating COVID, right? But to answer your question, the things that we've been doing, first of all, the engineering team we have a team of maintenance engineers and an umbrella of contractors that helps us to manage these buildings. And as stewards of the physical plants, right, we're working diligently to enhance ventilation, airflow, and filtration in all the spaces. So first, what our teams did was and continue to do is they're going through the buildings and those and the air handler units and making sure that they're functioning as designed, right? And any place that it hasn't been functioning, we've been making repairs. And that's just part of the work that we do overall, just in general. The other things that we've done are we've closed or restricted central fan recirculation dampers where we can. We've also rebalanced and adjusted some of the HVAC systems to increase total airflow. And, you know, these are, I'm speaking in generalities because each building is different, as Jose said. You know, we're starting systems earlier to bring fresh air into the buildings. And not only is that a strategy for COVID, but that's really a strategy that our chief engineers use to cool some of the buildings that don't have mechanical cooling. So they bring in fresh air early in the morning to cool the building. And then as we continue to bring fresh air in throughout the day, the buildings stay a little bit cooler. We've, where we can, and I think, you know, where we can, we've increased central air filtration from our typical MERV 8 filters to the MERV 13s. I'm sure, you know, everyone's heard about MERV 13s. That's the way to go, right?
Hospital grade.
So where the systems can handle it, we've absolutely done that. I'd like to share with you that all of our lead buildings, so all the buildings that are new that are lead, they were all designed to accommodate MERV 13 filters. So that was easy for us. I can say with confidence that you know, our new buildings are good to go. I can say with reasonable confidence that the buildings that have been touched in CIP 1, 2, and 3, you know, are functioning as they're supposed to. The legacy buildings, we are taking a very critical look at, you know, and looking to do some deeper analysis to ensure that that they're appropriate for these times. The tools that the team's using are anemometers and bolometer flow hoods to check the supply air that's coming into spaces. And then we are going to find some spaces, or we have determined some spaces that we may need to use some secondary in-space filters. You know, you've probably heard about some of the air scrubbers, the HEPA filters. And as we go through, you know, our processes, if we determine that we think we need that, we'll do so. Operable windows. So there have been places, you know, prior to COVID, we wanted to seal up buildings and use mechanical ventilation to maximize energy efficiency and also to ensure that we're filtering and conditioning air that's coming into the spaces. So some of the windows had been taken out of service. Some of the operable windows have. However, we're putting those types of windows back into service, knowing that will have some will have some benefit. What else are we doing? You know, I'd also just like to take this opportunity to share with all of you that that our team of engineers goes through building operators certification, and our chiefs and our seniors, you know, our journey level performers. We also have a systems engineer on our staff who's relatively new, but he's a mechanical engineer and he's helping us to look at, critically evaluate these spaces and look at these spaces as well. And many of you have already met Joe Fullerton, our energy and sustainability manager, and he is also well-versed in mechanical systems and is helping to inform our processes.
Can I just ask a quick question here?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
go
I mean,
ahead.
this is great. I mean, I'm so confident in the ability and the skill of the team. I mean, it's fabulous and top notch. Um, of, I guess one question I have is, if I were a faculty member or an administrator going into one of these buildings or a student, are there going to be buildings that you're going to deem not yet ready, and are we going to keep those closed? How do we, what are we going to do about that process? Because it seems like you're, doing everything you can, but are we going to end up, do we think either this fall or in next January with some buildings that we have deemed are not up to today's standards, specifically given COVID?
I can't answer that just yet. We do have to take, like I said, a critical look at our legacy buildings, and our focus thus far has been to ensure that everything is functioning as designed.
Got it. So thank you, and I appreciate your candid and candidness and your honesty. Is there a deadline that you've given the team to actually come up with that before you actually make decisions as to like an open or don't open a building? And if so, when is that?
So we were working toward hashtag January 3rd. But of course, we have now expedited our efforts. And again, so in looking at priorities, right? The buildings that are recently built, I'm not worried about them at all. It's our legacy buildings that our teams are really, really focusing on. And
so perhaps will this item come back up again next time, Chancellor Claire? If so, I think it would be great just to have some actual dates on those things and some decision points of what happens if they're not.
Agreed.
I think that anybody who's going to use those buildings has a right to know. Yeah.
So can I also, I want to jump into again and just say that we also have a very comprehensive workspace assessment process that, the deans and the facilities folks have been assessing every space that's currently occupied, and then brought that to the operations group. Okay. And as part of looking at those spaces, right, we've looked at ventilation as well. Okay. And I just want to be sure that everyone knows that we have a very comprehensive workspace assessment process in place, so that we've looked at all of those things prior to putting people in buildings. All right.
Thank you, Michelle. That leads to my second question, I guess, and that's where have we come from? What have we gotten done over the last year? So again, in March of last year, we said, hey, we think we're going to possibly open January 1, 2021.
Yep.
And there was expectations. There was markings that we said when we talked. I believe it was a specific question asked of Vice Chancellor Nunez around signage and barriers and all these face guards. So if I were to walk on the campus tomorrow at Skyline, CSM, Kenyatta, would they be 5%, 50%, 100% ready with all of that done, considering that we should have been ready for January 1, 2021 versus fall of 2021, possibly January 1, 2022 or January 3rd, hashtag.
I'll attempt to answer that again. The focus was hashtag January 3rd. And as Michelle just articulated, we've been doing building assessment. The direction was given just 2 weeks ago to all of the 3 facility managers and their engineering team that all of the high volume transaction areas to go ahead and install plexiglass. We have ordered the plexiglass. It's on the 3 sites. Have they been installed at Kenyatta? I would say I walked the site last week. They are installed. I can't speak to CSM, and I cannot speak to Skyline, but the team was given a directive as of 2 weeks ago that, hey guys, we're going to open up partially for fall of this year. Go ahead and expedite the installation of plexiglass. In terms of the social distancing markers and signage, Michelle and her team have done yeoman's work in terms of establishing that at all the areas that are currently occupied by the sections that are in progress right now for spring and for the summer. And then, of course, through the workplace assessment that Michelle talked about, we plan to have those in place as well come fall for the courses that are scheduled to come online.
All right.
But hashtag January 3rd, it's going to be 100%.
All right, thank you. So, but I mean, again, my concern or question was about where we were in March of 2020. And we said there's a possibility that we will open up January 2021, and we were moving towards that. So we didn't have fall 2021, January 2022 in our pathway. We didn't even fathom that that would be the case. And so if we were marching towards that date of January 2021, what was done then? If we were marching towards that, why was a lot of the plexiglass not ordered then? Why were the markings not done?
It was.
Then,
So we've had.
So if it was done then, why are we still saying it hasn't been up? Hasn't been done up to this point, and we're planning on doing it within the next 2 weeks.
So we ordered plexiglass early on, and we stockpiled. We did. And the reason, part of the reason why it wasn't just put in place was because we put together, like I said, this comprehensive workplace assessment process. And we really didn't know what the long-term look was going to look like. You know, we didn't want to put in plexiglass all over the campus, right? And potentially waste materials or damage our furniture putting this stuff in if today we weren't going to need it, right? We didn't know. So in the places that we assessed and the places that we determined we needed that, we put it in. And we also ensured that we had a supply so that we could do so. Now that we know we're coming back, right? We have supply on hand, and we're putting it up where it needs to be put up.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Yeah. Can I jump in about the you guys talk about mapping the ventilation?
I think that answered the question, but I think because time is so short, and I just want to make sure I get my last question in and give other board members an opportunity to ask their questions. My last question is, there was a comment made about students of color and why they may or may not be getting the vaccine. And Mike, you said, we know why. So I just want to know further data, or what do you have that you could speak to as to why students of color aren't considering the vaccine?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That's just based upon materials that I've read in the past. So that was probably just a very general statement.
Okay.
Although we did, I believe, and Vice Chancellor McMean helped me out, but I think we did do a survey and of our own students, and that I think that was the response. But I could be wrong. Aaron, I think he might have stepped away. Yeah.
I can take a look at their survey results. I don't recall the exact pieces off the top of my head. On the most recent return to campus, there was some variation with desegregation. There was some variation about willingness or interest in taking in-person classes in fall, with some students of color, some student groups, African American students, having less interest in in-person. Actually, the least amount of interest was expressed by Asian students, with our white and Latinx students expressing more interest for in-person. So there has been some variation just in interest in being online still for fall or face-to-face, at least in the most recent survey.
Thank you. And I understand that, but when the comment was made, we know why, then I want to actually know why, if we have data that speaks to the why. Because that might be a $1 million question as to some of the concerns that students are having.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Trustee Oliver.
So let me state the obvious. Providing health and safety, healthy, safe campuses is a precondition for doing our job as educators. And enough said on that. It's essential. Various comments, both in Chancellor Clare's presentation and some of the comments that were made, point out that this is not easy. It's not simple. There are some knotty problems that we face and that we have to answer. And the answers that we come up with will not make everyone happy. If you have a group that's saying, I don't want to teach if everyone's not vaccinated, and another group saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated, you can go through all those permutations. It's the tough work we've got to do to make those decisions, understanding it will not satisfy everyone. In looking at some of those student survey numbers, what's missing are the missing students. And I was trying to dig through my notes, but we discussed this last meeting. And my recollection is, we've seen a drop of about 12% in our FTES enrollment since COVID. And it's a statewide phenomenon. Other college districts have been hit harder. And when you analyze those numbers, the students who have vanished are disproportionately low-income students. And I believe from some of the state data I've seen, they're disproportionately African-American and Latinx students. And I believe also they're disproportionately entering students that are not entering. And those students are not responding to the survey because we've lost them. So if you're surveying folks who have, it's been said, but I guess to amplify it, you're surveying students who have made the transition. And you would expect there's a certain degree to which they're, the success stories, I don't know what the right term is, but it's working for them. We're not surveying the students that were not able to make the transition. I have a great deal of concern about, it's not our district alone, it's the entire community college system losing a vast number of students. So I put that into the mix when I think about accelerating the return. And if we're able to do options, which will allow those students and I guess faculty as well that have a greater comfort level for the time being with distance education only, while expanding the offerings for those who will benefit from showing up into an in-person classroom, we ought to be doing everything we can, to expand those options so that by come fall, the number of course sections offered in person are significantly expanded. Regarding the ventilation question, which was raised last meeting and again tonight, I believe it's necessary in all the work you're doing, and I applaud all the work. And I know this has put everybody, it's like been the acid test of everyone in facilities, to deal with stuff that we don't normally deal with. And I really applaud the great work. Make sure you are soliciting and hearing from employees that maybe they're in a building that's fine and modern, but they're in cubicles that are not spacious, that are fine and modern. And make sure you look at those individual workspaces and do whatever you can. And if it means buying HEPA, stand alone units to make the, to make the air non-toxic, it's worth doing. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All right. We allotted 45 minutes to this. We are now at 80 minutes. I think we have heard from everyone, at least the things that are the most critical items as far as that goes. And we do have other items on the agenda. And unless the board wants, we need to draw this to a close. I think we've expressed our opinions. We've heard from a lot of people that have given us a lot of good information. We are moving in a direction. And so I think I'm going to leave the last word with the chancellor since he has his hand up.
Be so glad to not be told I'm on mute. So thank you for the discussion, and yeah, really, are we on the right track? That's kind of what we want to hear. I originally put my hand up to respond to Trustee Holliver, and I don't disagree with you, Trustee Holliver, and I even said at the outset, yes, we're surveying students that have already made their plans, so I recognize that. I think there's going to be a lot of studies. I think there's a lot more with this COVID pandemic that has had a negative impact on student enrollment than just the modality. I think it's a little more difficult. Here's what I'm trying to do with my team here. We've heard you loud and clear about the desire to increase significantly the on-campus offerings. We didn't even talk about the student support services, but that's another area we can really get a touch with our students, and in some ways easier to do. The only limitation we have, frankly, is the staffing, and that's going to set the upper limit on what we're able to do. And so, just know that we're committed to doing as much as we possibly can, but I'm hesitant to just put unstaffed courses out there because I don't want to sell something that we may have to take away later. So just know we've heard you loud and clear. I actually agree with you. It's time, and we will push as hard as we can. And hopefully you feel like we're basically on the right track. We'll make some adjustments. Again, I appreciated the comments from the public, and we'll follow up on those. But thank you for the feedback tonight. It's very helpful.
I will reverse myself and recognize my distinguished colleague, Trustee Pimentel.
Thank you, Tom. I've found the discussion useful as well. However, it remains highly unspecific for me and for my taste. And I'd like to offer the following motion, if everyone would please consider this. And this is not a motion for action, but a motion for the board to provide specific guidance. And my motion would be to say that number one, everyone on campus is required to be vaxxed. Number two, that we're not going to set up a confirmation process to check and validate and enforce whether or not people are vaxxed. We're all adults and colleagues, and we can all trust one another. Number three, everyone on campus needs to have a mask, and we'll develop a norm that if anybody in a room wants to wear a mask, everybody in the room has to wear a mask. Next, that all student support services will be open and in person. And finally, that 50% of all classes will be available on campus. And if we have to add sections and they're unstaffed, and they remain unstaffed because we can't find teachers to teach them, then we're going to have to beg the patience of our students. But if we just say we're going to do our best, I don't believe that we will offer enough classes online, in person, to meet what I think is a reasonable demand of 50-50. Finally, I would encourage, as part of this motion, that the administration start negotiating now with the represented groups and start communicating now aggressively with all the stakeholders, including the students. We can't keep calling this a draft and kicking it down the line. We need to make some decisions. So that's my motion for the consideration of my colleagues.
All right. Well, I think it's a very good informational one. Unfortunately, this is on only for information, not for action. So it hasn't been agendized for an action item. So
I'm not suggesting action, Tom. I'm suggesting that the board provide clear direction to the administration. And so what I'm asking for is for my colleagues to consider my motion as a signal of communication from our board to the administration. I'm not asking for it to be a act of regulation by the board.
To provide direction, consensus for
All
direction.
right, I understand all of that, but now we're talking about classes, we're talking about 50-50. And I don't know that we are in a position to make that decision just because we are the board. I mean, that's why we have the people that work for us that tell us we can do this. We have the academic senate, we have the faculties, we have recommendations from the people that are boots on the ground telling us what they think we can actually do on site. And therefore, I applaud the idea, but I can't just arbitrarily say it will be 50-50 and it doesn't make any difference how you do it, because I just don't feel like I can do that. I can't justify it from where I'm coming from.
I think
I'm
it's
not
safe
an
to say you
authority
won't
just
be
because
voting
I'm a
for
board
this
member.
motion.
I'm sorry?
I think it's safe to say that you won't be voting for this.
So there's not going to be any
action.
voting. There's not going to be any voting on this because there is
I
no
have a
motion.
motion on the floor.
There is no motion because I
I'd like
can't.
a point of order.
All right, then I'll have to rule on
I'm
it.
asking for my colleagues, is there a second to my motion to provide direction from our board, not direction, unified, I guess it is direction, that this is our goal for the administration to try and meet?
Well, first of all, I will have to tell you that because it is non-agendized, we cannot take it up as a motion, and I won't accept the motion under these circumstances, not because I disagree with what you're saying, but it is not properly agendized. Now, if the board thinks they
Fair
want
enough.
to overrule that, that's fine, but that's
Right.
the way that I'm going.
No,
Fair enough. I respect that, Tom. You're right.
So John,
I'm sorry, I can't, I'm not disagreeing with you in concept, but we have a protocol that we have to follow and it's not agendized. And so,
yeah. So John, he's correct in as far as process. And if we are going to get consensus and for direction, it should be a consensus of the body. And so, if one says no, then I think the best thing to do at this point would be for you to give your opinion and trust that Mike and his team will take all that into consideration into what they bring back to us.
and before we go any further, I have no problem working towards that goal
Right.
as far as that goes. But I can't direct them that you will do it 50-50 and somehow they have to do it. I think we should say this is what the board would like to be the goal. We'd like you to make your best effort to reach that goal if possible.
I second your motion, Tom.
It's not a motion.
So that sounds like consensus. So I think that's what
That sounds like consensus then.
Yeah, so I think that's what John was getting at. And so if we can get consensus on that from the other two trustees, then I think we're good.
Trustee Trustee Petridis.
Yeah, two things. So we could go back to the recording to see, but I believe 1 or 2 meetings ago, we gave the recommendation that we move from what I think we were at like 10% for the fall to 30%. That was the direction we gave. I believe we even may have said that number. So I'm not sure that I'm comfortable right now just saying, okay, actually not 30, we've just moved it ahead to 50. I think if maybe we should go back to the minutes and check that, but if we said 30, then I think we can say 30 to 50, but I'm not comfortable just now moving the bar after we already gave a mandate within the last, not a mandate, a recommendation over within the last month. I don't recall the time. That's that point. On the other point, I support your draft, Chancellor Claire, with the recommendations of mandatory vaccines with the exceptions. And I think the one place I might disagree with you, Trustee Pimentel, is around this issue. And I think, and Chancellor Claire, you said you had some ideas about this. The idea that we can just trust people to be adults, and if everybody in the class agrees that you don't have to wear a mask, that would be a nightmare. I think that's completely unenforceable. I think that puts an undue burden on people to speak up who aren't comfortable with that. So that's the piece I don't support of what you said. And I know all we're doing is trying to reach general consensus. So that's where I sit at this point.
I just respond to that last point, Lisa, because I get your point. I was more concerned about the chaos that would be created by trying to come up with an administrative system to prove vaccinations and check it off against the computer and enforce it. And what if somebody doesn't have it?
There's a lot of
4 or 5
there's some
month
other clever
period.
things that people are doing that I think that we could recommend that the administration looks at. Like if you're not vaccinated, you have to do weekly COVID tests. I mean, there are other things that we could put into place that might be a bit arduous, but that other facilities and places are doing. So I think there's some workarounds to some of that.
Sure.
Okay, Trustee Holliver, you have your hand up.
Well, I lost some of the bullet points of Trustee Pimentel's. You
10
covered
point non.
Yeah, so I think I don't remember if we said 30%, but I think what I agree with what Trustee Petridis just said on that topic of let's try to move the goalpost. I don't know. We're not moving the goalpost. We're moving the ball towards the goal. We don't want to move the goalpost. But the other stuff, I just lost the content around mass testing and voluntary, or we're adults. So I do think those are policy. Those are like kind of, we either have rules or we don't have rules around reopening. And I'd like to see that before I know what it is that Trustee Pimentel is recommending. I'd rather not be doing it right now, because I think that leads to a kind of a whole new round of talking stuff through, and I'm just mindful of the time. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
Bring that back.
My non-motion is formally withdrawn.
Well, or we can bring it back to the next, board meeting. But I think they're going to have to be decisions. We're either going to have certain requirements or not. But let's just put it out there and get public comment and do it.
So are we saying, are we not in a position to tell the chancellor that the draft that he presented tonight is moving in the right direction?
Well, I don't know what the other points were. Could you repeat them?
They're in our board. They're in our board. I'm talking about the board packet.
Oh, you mean
there's
the
a 2-page
okay.
draft,
Okay.
and I'm
Sure.
supporting that draft and the movement of that
okay.
direction. So I think, I don't know if you all are in agreement about that or not.
I support the draft too. I think it's great. I would suggest that we put specific numbers in as goals, and whether it's 30% or 50%, I just don't want to keep it sliding.
Yes, Trustee Goodman.
Yeah, I would just add, again, if the focus, and it's been thrown around a couple times about students of color, I do believe that if we are going to acknowledge that students of color have legitimate reasons as to why they may not get the vaccine, and we're going to say, hey, we're going to mandate a vaccine, we have to be aware of that and what the implications might be for those students. And so I would also suggest that this flex classroom that we've talked about be a part of it, but not just something we talk about in theory and say we'll get there, but something that this board looks at and says, hey, how do we fast track this? That this is a part of anything that we do moving forward to ensure that any student that wants to attend our campus will have that ability to attend our campus through a flex modality.
All right. I think that's been noted by administration as well. All right, then I think we're moving in the direction of your recommendation at this point, Chancellor Clare. There have been some other things added to it, Trustee Goodman, just right now. I think you've heard where the board is moving as far as that goes. I think you're going to, and the administration is going to try and move this as far as we can forward. That's reasonably possible and that is safe. And that's, I think, where we're going. We don't want to limit. We want to move forward. Trustee Petridis?
I think there are just two more pieces. One is that there is also some kind of community involvement. So whether there's a survey to community or just somehow that voice is taken into account in this draft. And I've forgotten what the other piece is now, but I think that community involvement is important.
Okay. All right, well, that was a very interesting conversation. So many things that are so pertinent to what's going on. And, you know, we turn on the TV and see the news tomorrow, and then it all changes again. So
Yeah.
Hopefully we're going to be okay.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
If we can move on then.
I'm sorry. I remembered the other thing. Transparency. Let's try. I would also like us to strive to make very clear what's going on, like the conversation tonight from Michelle and Jose around, you know, where we are in that process. We don't need to, you know, we know we have a highly skilled workforce there around these issues. That's not what I mean by transparency. I mean to say there are 5 buildings on this campus that we are still assessing, and we will make the call date of August 1st as to whether or not we will occupy those buildings, like just real transparency. So you don't have to wonder if you're a teacher or an administrator, like, can I go into that building? Is it safe? You know, I just think we have to be as transparent as possible.
Okay. With that, then the next
President,
yes.
I think there are a couple of members of the public that have posted that they wanted to comment on this, but didn't
where
have
is
that opportunity.
Where did you see that?
On the Q&A.
Q&A.
There was comment already.
Did we do
there
that?
was comment.
Yeah,
and
we've
then
had
we went back. We
public
did.
comment twice.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure everybody's.
But we can note
heard.
the questions in the Q&A.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item is